My name is Nancy Farrow, also known as Mama Lou, and I'm the founder of Epic Experience. Epic Experience mission is to empower adult cancer survivors and thrivers to live beyond cancer. I hope that as you listen to Campfires of Hope, Living Beyond Cancer, you find hope, healing, and empowerment. Through stories and education, we aim to guide those impacted by cancer, and more importantly, offer love and support to anyone out there who needs it. This is Beyond Cancer.
Father times dance through the night with the ghosts of America's spine. Well, he's still on that side, the family man's pride, and hopes we will rise once again.
Hello everyone, this is Gail, aka Sunshine. Today we have Eric Goss joining us around the campfire. Eric, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. It's good to be here.
So first, if you wouldn't mind telling me and the listeners a little bit about yourself, your background, where you're from, and please include one fun fact.
Okay. I grew up in Lexington, Massachusetts. I moved to the DC metro area in the mid-90s. And let's see, I'm a graphic designer. And on the side, I play saxophone and piano. I took up oil painting about 10 years ago. And as for the fun fact, I was in the same high school class as Ethan Zone from Survivor.
Were you really?
Yes, and we were both diagnosed with Hodgkin's, but 24 years apart.
Oh, wow. Well, that is a fun fact. I'm going to ask
Yes.
another one. What is your
Okay.
favorite thing to paint now that you're doing oil paintings? Is it nature scenes, people?
I think my go-to is still lifes, landscapes, but I've been trying to focus more on still lifes because that's an area of weakness for me. So
that is really cool.
Yeah.
I love it. Learning.
Thank you.
We can always learn new things. That is really cool. So what brings us together, of course, is cancer. So let's talk a little bit about your diagnosis. When were you diagnosed? What kind of cancer, treatment, that whole thing?
I was diagnosed on September 16th, 1985 with Hodgkin's disease, now called Hodgkin's lymphoma, stage 3A. The symptoms, I had coughing fits for a few months that were unexplained, the July before the diagnosis. And then around the time that I started 6th grade, my parents noticed that I was scratching my neck a lot. I was having a lot of itching, and there was also a growth that was starting at the base of my neck.
Okay.
Which had actually started underneath my rib cage.
But you didn't know. I mean, at this point, could you feel it? Or is it something more that your parents just kind of noticed you scratching and messing with?
I felt it, but I didn't associate that type of thing with cancer, especially not at that age.
Not at 11, right?
So, yeah. So they took me to a pediatrician, and his first words were, "I don't know what this is, but I don't like it."
Oh, gosh.
And then they told me that they were going to take me to Children's Hospital in Boston, Massachusetts. And that's when I knew that it was serious.
Yeah.
The first thing they did was the biopsy. And that confirmed what they suspected.
Yeah.
And at that point, they were going to have to determine the staging to decide on the treatment plan. And this was in the age before PET scans. So they had to open me up, take out my spleen, part of my liver, and some lymph nodes.
Wow.
And it was determined that I was stage 3A because it had spread to my spleen, but it hadn't gotten to the bone marrow yet.
How
So
big, I mean, how big a tumor do you remember, or
it
lymph
was
node was it at that point?
pretty large. I
Yeah.
mean, I only felt it when it came up
Oh, I
past the
see.
top of
Right.
my rib cage, but it had started underneath.
Wow.
So yes.
And then treatment. What did they do?
Yes. Well, they were debating on whether to do just radiation or radiation and chemo. And it was decided they would do both. And then there was the choice of between MOP and ABVD chemo protocols. And it was actually unknown to me that they were debating that. It was between the doctors and my parents at the time.
Yeah.
My parents chose MOP because it's basically a choice between damaging your heart and lungs or
Mm.
damaging your fertility.
Oh my gosh.
So MOP, it attacks your fertility, but it spares your heart and lungs. So that's
Yeah.
what they went with. And I think it was the right decision.
Yeah.
Um,
How long did
so,
it go on? How long were you actually in treatment?
uh, it was 6 months of chemotherapy. And then in between, it was 3 months of radiation. So 3 months, 3 months, and 3 months.
Okay, and you're in 6th grade at this point, 11 years old.
Correct,
How
yes.
I mean, how did that impact you physically as well as mentally, emotionally, and all the rest? I mean, that's huge for someone that
Mhm.
age.
Physically, um, the chemo, it caused severe nausea and mouth
Mhm.
sores. Um, and I um, I think I handled it pretty well, actually. I
Hmm.
mean, I experienced it, but once it was done, I was able to go back to school the next day. So
In other
there was
words,
this
you'd have a
idea of,
treat and then you just go back to school?
yeah, it was every 2 weeks.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I had this idea, the mindset of this too shall pass,
Yeah, yeah,
um, and then the radiation, it was that was a lot, that was a different kind of thing. It was a lot
yeah.
more complicated because the treatment itself was painless.
Mhm.
It's like an X-ray pretty much.
Right.
Um, but for somebody who's 11 and still developing,
Ugh.
having 7,000 CGY of radiation is going to have some long-term effects,
Yeah,
um, that
definitely.
are far more um, noticeable than for somebody who's fully developed.
Yeah,
So yeah, so I've had some disfigurement, especially to my mantle area, and I also deal with radiation fibrosis now.
and what is that exactly? Sorry.
It's stiffening of the muscles,
Yeah.
especially during cold weather like now.
Mhm.
Um, and there's also the potential for long-term cardiac issues that
Yeah,
come from having that much radiation directed at your heart.
yeah,
So far, I haven't experienced any, but
yeah.
um, it's kind of like waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah, and I know from being involved in Epic that there are other survivors who have gone through something similar and are experiencing
Mhm.
exactly what you are going through.
Right.
How so now it's been decades of survivorship.
Mhm. Yes.
How what has happened during that time in terms of, again, how have you coped with it mentally, emotionally,
Mhm.
over those decades? Have you had a reoccurrence? That's also kind of a question I'm putting in there.
It has not come back.
Well, that's good.
I had a benign tumor in my lower spine, probably from the radiation, but
Yeah,
that was removed without too much bother. So, but I do get yearly follow-ups
yeah,
at with an oncologist, and as well as an echocardiogram every 5 years.
Yeah.
So.
And we're doing a series on clinical trials. So, and that's why we have you with us. So what has your experience been with a clinical trial, and how did it even come up? Again, we're talking decades.
Yes.
Since you're actually diagnosed. So how did that all
Right.
come about?
Well, I've never been able to find an effective way of coping with the late effects mentally.
Yeah.
I've tried all types of therapies. I've done cognitive behavioral therapy, eye movement desensitization, reprocessing, and they might have had some short-term effect, but eventually it took me back to square one. So I do go to the clinic where I go to follow ups, the Aquilino Cancer Center in Rockville, Maryland, had a psilocybin trial going on. And
can you explain what that is, just in case
okay,
someone listening
well,
doesn't know?
psilocybin, it's a psychedelic drug. I know there was research done on it in the 1970s, but then that got put on hold due to the whole all that anti-drug propaganda that came up, and it's only gotten back on track recently, where they've been holding clinical trials for people who with trauma, PTSD, depression, etc. So when I was introduced to this trial, I thought this is going to be a great opportunity. Nothing else has seemed to have had any long-term effect, and maybe this might be the push that I need in order to cope with survivorship effectively.
I hope you enjoy this episode of our Campfires of Hope podcast. Here at Epic Experience, we make it our goal to serve the cancer community through our collective programs such as this podcast, our week-long adventure camps, regional programs across the country, and Thrive VR, a custom virtual reality experience benefiting patients in cancer centers. If you would like to be a part of our community of supporters, please go to epicexperience.org and click Donate. Thank you for listening to Campfires of Hope, Stories of Cancer. With gratitude, Wingman, also known as Colin Farrell, Executive Director of Epic Experience. Epic Experience is a registered 501c3 organization.
And so did it take you a while to kind of agree to go for it, or was it fairly a quick decision on your part?
I was,
yeah.
Oh, I agreed to it immediately. Now you have to go through a whole screening process of that went on for several weeks, I think, or actually, several months now that I think about it, where you go in for blood work, and they also have questionnaires that you fill out, where they screen you for like depression and any thoughts of suicide. If you mention any suicidal thoughts, you're immediately screened out, because although psilocybin, it's not going to create suicidal feelings, it might prompt somebody to act. So
what they've had, yeah. So you went through all that, and now do you go in to the clinic on a weekly basis? Are you still involved, and has it been effective?
It has been effective. I don't go on a weekly basis, but I was part of a cohort of 6 patients at various points in treatment. And we met as a group a number of times before the dosing. And then after the experience, we continue to stay in touch monthly. There's a facilitator who does a virtual group. So, and
how has it helped? I mean, how would you say, and for you particularly, this, you even looked at this because of the mental strain of dealing with survivorship for decades, right? So
yes.
how has it helped you, I don't know, change your thought patterns or talk to yourself differently or things like that?
I'll make an analogy. It's like, imagine a hiking trail that's gotten completely overgrown. And the psilocybin is like a lawnmower or like a sickle where you cut through these vines and brambles, and allow yourself to access the trail again. And when you cannot cut through those things, it gives you detours where distressing thoughts, when they come up, you can find a way around them, or you don't have to follow them wherever they go.
Right. Do you feel like you have options now that you didn't have before, mentally at least, in ways to work around thoughts and things like that?
Yes, it's definitely been a long-term improvement. I know there's a sense of that there's more to me than the cancer now, that I'm
That's
not as
wonderful. Yeah.
tangled up in it as I used to be. And actually, something that I've been able to do since then is become a mentor to newly diagnosed patients through the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society.
Oh, that's great.
I think before the dosing, I'm not sure I would have been able to handle that.
Yeah.
I had these unhelpful coping mechanisms, where I would compare myself to other people who had gone through
Yeah.
similar things and wonder why I couldn't have had their experience, or why I wasn't able to cope with it as well as they did.
Yeah.
Now, those thoughts may come up, but they're not as um, easy to push aside.
Right.
They're much easier to push aside now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I imagine that gives you, it's like opened up space for you to now help these people who are in the same position. Do you,
Yes.
like when you're mentoring, is it often young people like you were, or anyone who's been diagnosed with Hodgkin's, something, that you were?
Well, most people with that diagnosis, it's usually in young adulthood. It's very
Okay.
rare for it to be at age 11. So it has been mostly young adults. Yeah.
Young adults. Okay.
hmm
How long, I guess, how long did it take on this clinical trial for you to get to a place where you felt like, okay, I'm in a place where I can now give back
hmm
by doing the mentoring?
Well, the clinical trial was, it was actually a day-long event where
Okay.
you're administered 25 milligrams of the psilocybin, and then um, you're given a room where um, you wear an eye mask and you have headphones, and there's a soundtrack
Hmm.
that is queued up to correspond with how the psilocybin works.
Interesting.
So it's sort of like a deep cleaning in a way. It's very intense.
Yeah.
There are moments of euphoria, and there are also moments where it feels very abrasive. Um, but it's hard to describe. You you had to be there in
Yeah.
a way. But
So it was a one-day
it was a one-day
event.
thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
And how long after that one day then did you really start feeling like you could hack away those vines and the things so that the path was clearer to the point where you could actually mentor others, that's just great.
I noticed the benefits immediately
Really?
upon the end of it. Yes. I
That's
noticed I was
incredible.
able to push away those distressing thoughts. Um,
And since then, so how long ago was this then?
this was April of 2021, so it's been
So we're going on 4 years, and
almost
since
4
then,
years. Yes,
you've been able to continue to find that it's much easier to push those thoughts away.
it is. I mean, I don't think the effects are quite as strong as they were early on.
Mhm.
Um, it, I know there are future follow-up studies in the works, so
Mhm.
I'm also considering um, applying to those. But I do notice, in general, I definitely have a better outlook.
That's great. Wow.
Uh,
Is there anything you wish you would have known beforehand?
Um, let's see. I took some notes here. I I don't think there's anything I wish I had known. I think it helps to go into that experience with um, some ambivalence. I think that's healthy. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so
And
I would,
open-mindedness, I would imagine
yeah.
too.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's best not to look at it as a magic bullet. It's not going to solve your problems, but it will give you tools to cope with problems as they come up.
Excellent. That's a great way to look at it.
Mhm.
Is there anything else that you would wanna share with someone listening who might be considering a similar, trial, or someone who's gone through cancer like you have?
Mhm. Um, I would suggest that it's something to look into for anyone who's dealing with lingering psychological issues after the treatment. Um, it it may not help everyone to the same extent, but it probably isn't going to hurt.
Mhm.
Um, and also, as a general piece of advice, I think something that would have helped me in treatment was not to have that worry about being a burden to others.
Hmm.
I think if I was able to put that aside, that would have helped me to focus more on myself and getting better.
Yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, if you could go back, how do you think you could have done that? Even as whether as an 11-year-old or older, I'm wondering if you've come up with
Mhm.
ways that you could have done it differently. Obviously, we can't go back, but I'm
Mhm.
wondering.
At that point, I was naive compared to how I am now.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know how I could have done it any differently. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, now I have a much wider view of the whole thing, but
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a great lesson, though. I can think it's
Mhm.
easy for anyone, especially a child, but
Right.
anyone to feel like a burden. I mean,
Mhm.
you can probably see the impact it's having on your parents, or you could, just as,
Right.
another survivor going through treatment can see the impact it's having on their loved ones or their
Mhm.
caregivers. But that is an excellent, piece of advice for someone listening to not
Yes. Mhm.
not feel like you're being a burden. You're going through it, right? I mean, it is
Right,
what it is.
exactly. Mhm.
Well, Eric, thank you. Thank you for sharing all of this. This is interesting, educational to me, and really encouraging that you we're able to come out of that and now can be in a place to mentor others who need someone like you who's been through it. I think that's fantastic.
Absolutely.
So, and then I always end by asking one kind of fun question to end on a lighter note. Marshmallows over a campfire, slow and steady,
Mhm.
or flame and crispy?
I'm trying to think back to when I didn't have to watch my blood glucose levels. I would say slow and steady.
Slow and steady, get it nice
Yeah,
and golden brown. Yep.
right.
Very good. Very good. Well, Eric, thank you so much. I
My
really
pleasure.
appreciate your vulnerability and you're willing to talk to us about these things. I'm sure you've really impacted someone out there.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And to everyone else, until the next time we gather around the campfire, keep living beyond cancer. Thank you for listening to this episode of Campfires of Hope, Living Beyond Cancer. For more information about Epic Experience and our programs, or to donate, please visit our website at epicexperience.org. Music for this podcast is provided by Moonshiner Collective. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us so we can share our story with more people. Also, be sure to subscribe wherever you get podcasts so you'll know when new episodes are released. We hope you come back and join us for our next episode.
Father,